Many people aspire to be more productive in their day-to-day lives, but very few people actually know how to practice being more productive. In this video, I will explain the best category of metric I use for quantifying work and how tracking these metrics will optimize your workflow for productivity and ensure the most results. Let's get right into it. There are 4 categories that all metrics fall under: internal input, internal output, external input, and external output. The main topic of this video will be about internal output. But before we dive in, let's define a few terms that'll help us understand what these 4 categories even mean. The first is work. Work, as it relates to this video, I will define as intentional, focused effort on a task. The intent or reason behind doing the task can be anything, but it must be something. There must be an end goal in mind for whatever it is you are working on. This is your desired outcome. Next is productivity. I believe productivity should be quantified by the total volume or quality of output that your work produces. And those outputs must make sense for whatever your intended desired outcome for doing the work is. Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to get better at drawing. You could either track how good your drawings get over time, which would be quality, or how many drawings you make over time, quantity. Both of those metrics work since it makes sense that either of them could make you better at drawing. On the contrary, if all you did was watch tutorials on YouTube on how to get better at drawing, but you never drew anything yourself, clearly you're not going to get better at drawing. So that output would not make sense. Your outputs need to make sense for whatever your desired outcome is. Now let's define the terms that make up each of the 4 categories of metrics. We need to first understand the conceptual difference between internal and external. Internal refers to things within your direct control to influence or change. Examples of this include things relating to yourself, the actions you take, and your response to external stimuli. External is the opposite. External refers to things outside your direct control you cannot influence or change in a meaningful way. Examples of this include things relating to other people, what others think of you, and how many views your Instagram reel gets. It's the same idea when applying these terms to metrics. Internal metrics are thus quantified by factors that you have full and direct control over. If you sit down and work for 2 hours, the time you worked is an example of an internal metric. External metrics are thus the opposite. They rely on external sources to be quantified. Earlier, I mentioned that the number of views you get on a social media post is an example of something that is external, something you do not have control over. But some would argue that you actually do. You might say that by knowing how to make viral content and posting many times a day directly results in more views. But both of those things are actually internal. Learning the skill and posting frequently are both things you have full control over. You'd be correct to say there is a strong correlation between those internal actions and your desired external outcome, which is views. But just posting videos will never guarantee a certain number of them. Tracking how many views, likes, or followers you receive as metrics are all dependent on someone else on the other end doing those actions, which you inherently have no meaningful control over. The next 2 terms that make up the 4 categories are input and output. Input refers to the action you take that leads to the outcome you desire. Input equals action. In sales, for example, if your desired outcome is to close deals, your input could be making sales calls. So, the metric you would track is how many calls you make that day. Next, output refers to the outcome you desire from the action you take. Output equals outcome. Not to be confused from the intended desired outcome from the beginning, this outcome directly refers to what you get out from the action that is your input. If you want to track the output from the sales example from before, you would only track how many deals you closed regardless of how many calls you made in total. Simply put, it's the difference between what you put in and what you get out. Now that we've defined all the terms, let's take a look at the 4 categories that every metric falls under. The first is internal input. Internal input refers to the action you take that leads to the outcome you desire on something you have direct control over. If you tell yourself at the start of the day you won't go home until you have made 400 sales calls, regardless of how many you close, you would be tracking an internal input metric. You have direct control over the action of calling, and your input would be the number of times you call, which in this case would be 400. Depending on how good of a salesman you are, you could be sure to close a certain percentage of the calls you make. Setting the bar high with, for example, 400 calls per day guarantees a certain level of productivity. But I believe there is an even better strategy. Internal output refers to the outcome you desire from taking action on something you have direct control over. This is very similar to internal input. The only difference is that you aren't tracking what you put in, and instead you are now tracking what you get out. Let's say you tell yourself at the start of the day you won't go home until you close 50 deals, regardless of how many calls needed to make that happen. You would be tracking an internal output metric. Just like before, you have direct control over the action of calling, and your output would be the number of deals you closed. By choosing this method, you ensure to complete your desired outcome no matter what it takes. It may take 100 calls, or it may take 1,000. Either way, if you stick to it, it leaves no room to miss the target you set for your desired outcome. There's also another benefit you get by choosing internal output over internal input. Imagine you are the salesman in the internal output example, and your friend is the salesman in the internal input example. If both of you aspire to be as productive as possible and set goals in your respective categories, 50 closed deals for you, 400 sales calls for your friend, assuming you and your friend close the same number of deals per calls made, if it takes you both more than 400 calls to close 50 deals, your friend will stop short and you will end up with more results. And since you had to go over 400 calls, you would end up with more experience and get better at the skill of closing deals faster than your friend, which will ultimately lead to more productivity later on. And this is why I believe internal output is the best out of all 4 categories. We're going to go over both external categories together. External input refers to the action you take that you blindly hope leads to the outcome you desire in which you cannot control. So, it's the action that leads to the outcome you cannot control. External output refers to the outcome you desire from taking action on something you cannot control. So, it's the outcome from the action you cannot control. Let's take a look at the social media example I gave a little earlier in this video. Let's say you want to build a personal brand online, but instead of focusing on any of the internal metrics, all you want to do is put all your attention on the external ones. Your designated desired outcome is an arbitrary follower goal for the end of the month. Although you post every day, and sometimes your reels get thousands of views, you cannot seem to get any significant increase in followers. This is what commonly happens when tracking either of the external metrics. There's a disconnect between the actions you take and the outcome you desire. The only real difference between external input and external output is which side you're tracking, what you put in versus what you get out. Counting videos posted in hopes of followers versus counting followers while posting videos. In practice, it may circumstantially be working in your favor, and you may be reaching your desired outcomes. The problem lies in the fact that because the desired outcome is inherently external, there are so many other factors you cannot control or are not accounting for that plays into whether or not you show progress over time. The input does not necessarily result in the output, essentially rendering any data from tracking such metrics much less useful, as well as potentially derail your progress towards the outcome you wanted in the first place. Alternatively, if you redirected your focus on only the things you can control, changing your desired outcome to either posting X number of videos or making each subsequent video better in at least one way. Many external factors like followers will happen as a byproduct. Before I end the video, I just want to give some final thoughts on why I even made this video. These are frameworks that have helped me be more productive in my work, and I hope this video helps others do the same. But of course, everybody is different and the same things won't work for everybody. There is nuance to every practical application of these frameworks, and they aren't 100% foolproof. Use this information as it appears useful for you. The ideas in this video are meant to help you become more productive naturally, not derail your attention to obsess over how you work, ultimately making you less productive. In this video, I encourage you to give internal output metrics a try if you tend to gravitate towards external metrics normally. But it's not necessarily bad to track external metrics, as long as you are aware of the disconnect between the given action and the desired outcome, and have a good system in place to keep yourself on track if you do get derailed. External metrics can be great motivators and keep people excited about the work they are doing, which at the end of the day might help with overall long-term productivity the most. Well, that's it for the video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.